I'm really excited that you're joining us for today's Conversations and Connections session. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot as this series has started to kind of unfold over the last several months is just about how uneven AI is coming into higher education. We hear the term AI adoption a lot, and it sounds like it's a thing, like it's a switch that you can flip or a single policy that gets written. But the reality is pretty different. Adoption is happening in pockets across the institution. Understanding or acceptance can be really uneven. Faculty and staff are navigating all of this while continuing to do all the good work that we always have to do. So, in today's conversation, I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit more about institutions in general, what people are seeing from inside some different campuses, how AI is being introduced, how it's being resisted or misunderstood, and how it's being supported through everyday practice. Just as importantly, I hope to talk about where things are going well, and then where they might be kind of falling off the rails a little bit. I want to use today's conversation to keep us oriented, to surface some insights and help all of us think more clearly about what institutional AI adoption really looks like when faculty, staff, and students are at the center of it. So I would encourage you to think about what this means for our students and their learning experiences, but also what it means for you. You're a professional working inside higher education right now at this moment. We're preparing learners for a changing world, but we're also navigating that change ourselves. Both of those perspectives matter, and I think that we're going to be able to kind of embrace all of that in today's conversation. Really excited to introduce today's panelists, three colleagues whose work spans faculty development, instructional design, learning science, institutional change. I've had the pleasure of getting to work with them over the last 7 months, as they were all contributors to a book I just edited called Empowering Educational Development and Faculty Growth with AI. So I'm really excited to pick their brains here today, put them on the spot, have a conversation that kind of ranges a little widely from there. Jennifer Friberg is here. She is the cross-endowed chair in the Scholarship of Teaching and professor of Communication Sciences and Disorders at Illinois State University. Leading voice in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, her work focuses on evidence-based pedagogy, clinical education, and how educators engage the world beyond the academy. She has been deeply involved in institutional conversations around AI, pedagogy, and responsible instructional practice. David Giovagnoli is Assistant Director of Scholarly Teaching and Learning and Pedagogy Lead for the Adaptive Edge Institute at Illinois State University. An academic developer and instructor, his work focuses on faculty identity, teaching development, and supporting instructors as they navigate moments of pedagogical change. More recently, his work has centered on helping faculty respond thoughtfully and effectively to the emergence of generative AI in teaching and learning. The emergence of generative AI, what's that? Uh, Nicole Weber's here. She is an educator and researcher focused on learner engagement, belonging, and human connection in digital and online learning environments. Assistant professor and program coordinator for instructional design and learning technology at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Her work explores how emerging technologies, including generative AI, can enhance learning experiences while remaining grounded in care, connection, and student expectations. So, Jennifer, David, Nicole, really glad to have you here. I appreciate you taking time out of what I'm sure is a very busy schedule at your home institutions to have a little bit of a conversation with us today. Uh, got some questions I kind of want to run through, but as I think I've related before, happy to just sort of let this veer off into different areas as we might want to pursue different ideas. So don't feel afraid to throw questions in response to questions or take us off trail. But I kind of wanted just to think a little bit about that gap that I was talking about, institutional intentions around AI and how higher ed professionals actually experience that support on the ground. I guess I'm just trying to come up with a way that we can support the people doing the work. We're thinking about students, and that's really important, but we're faculty, we're staff. How do we support people who are stuck in this moment? Jennifer, I'm wondering maybe we can start off with you if you've just got some thoughts or ideas around this, different things you've seen that work.
Yeah, so it's a good question and a big question. So I'll start with a corner of it, and then maybe Nicole and David can jump in. But from the time we started talking about generative AI, David and I had offices literally around in the same hallway, and we'd stand in each other's doorways and think about what does this mean for us, as human beings who are creative and intellectual, but also then for our students and for the faculty who we both support on our campus. And those are big, unwieldy kinds of conversations because, it moves so fast. And, all of a sudden, boom, it was here. And institutions are so slow to respond. They're just not nimble. And, it at least at first, um, I found it very frustrating how slowly our institution rallied behind the need to have conversations about Gen AI. I think a lot of people were hoping it would just go away. And it was very clear that it wasn't going to do that as it continued to evolve and be used. And so, I think that initial tension in the kind of speed with which things happened and responses happened was, my first sort of experience around Gen AI and thinking about the institution. But I really feel like there are spaces on most campuses, ours certainly, where there are groups of people who are doing really wonderful work. It's leading projects, it's communities of practice, it's thinking about how to creatively use technologies in ways that maybe push our institutions to think differently about how to acquire technology, what to support, how to, wrap our hands around like, my God, what is this thing? And how do we make our data secure? And how do we protect our students and their intellectual property? There's just so much. And I find that the successes that you sort of referenced to maybe talking about are happening in smaller pockets in institutions where there are people who are project, tasked, and they're really have a mission and a focus on a particular aspect of Gen AI. And I don't know, David or Nicole, you might disagree or have a different take on that, but tension and the need to move, I guess, are my first two reactions.
I can just jump in there because something you said, Jennifer, is really great. I think you're right. It's about those pockets, right, of innovation that are happening and people doing really great things. And I think one of the things is how does that get out into kind of the broader landscape of the campus, right? I know a traditional strategy is for, there to be little grants given and things like that. But sometimes that work to do it just kind of disappears into like nothing. And so I think it's about how do we get some of those more intentional projects out there to be shared with the larger campus community in places like a virtual teaching commons, so they just don't like go into the ether where it's not really shared. And one of the things that is really great on our campus that I really do love is our AI community of practice. So that's another thing that you said that I really just wanted to echo, that people getting together talking about challenges and things that are going really well and things that they're struggling with is really, I think, a really fantastic strategy. But I think one of the hardest things, I don't know, David and Jennifer, if you're seeing this too, is when you have something that's big and I don't know, it's like an octopus, right? Or more than an octopus. It has a lot of legs. And like you said, there's just so many things to it. It can make people reluctant, right, to kind of dig in. And one of those reluctancies is also sometimes time. It takes a lot of time when things are evolving. You're also trying to catch up. You're trying to figure out what this thing is. And that's one of the hard things. Nate, you said it on the, like when you introduced everything, it was like, oh, well, like, thanks for spending your time here today. Cause there's just not a lot of time and time is a resource. So I think a big question that we're trying to figure out in higher ed, and we have been for a while, right, is how do we give people time to do that like deep work, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that point because from the Teaching and Learning Center perspective, a lot of the strategies we're offering to folks to, let's say, mitigate the impact of Gen AI in their classrooms are the robust, time-intensive pedagogical strategies we've been arguing for a long time already. And so I agree that I think AI is creating a moment like if we have to deal with this, that means we have to pull back the curtain on a lot of other teaching and learning practices like our teaching and learning center supports OpScan, Scantron sheets and things like that. And so I think it's a moment where people are wanting to go back to some of those methods, but we're having to continue to argue that no, like the way we work work this in or keep it out. Whatever is appropriate pedagogically is experiential learning and problem-based learning and all the things that take a lot of time, but how do we give faculty that time? And one other thing I say on what's working though is um, ISU has 21,000 students and 6 or 7,000 employees, and purchasing takes a long time. And so we're not very agile, but our provost was like, we need to move faster. So she let us form what we're calling the Adaptive Edge Institute. It's 1.9 FTE. It's a full stack developer plus me, an educational developer, and a faculty member leader. And we're doing like trying to do these small pilots, but then document it so that the pilots don't go into the ether, like you're saying, because we're concerned that folks are independently going to be doing all this development work or creating stuff on their own. But if we can centralize it and keep an institutional memory, because also trying to grapple with structures that don't like moving quickly, like IT belongs to its own group and academic affairs is separate. And so this is a cross-divisional effort too, to sort of resist that siloing. And so I think sort of like the problem with AI is the same problem that universities have in general, is that it's hard to coordinate across divisions. And so I think it's hopefully a moment where we'll figure some of that out together.
I feel like I asked you guys a question for which there is no real answer. And you guys you're all touching on this idea that we need time to commit to these developments, to these improvements, to just thinking about this. And one of the ways that comes through is, David, that seems like a great example of documenting what's going on, getting the institutional support to try something. I mean, I'm sure you'd love to have bigger buy-in to your adaptive edge, but the fact that you got anything in these sort of behemoth dinosaur-shaped universities, a little slow to adapt, a little slow to embrace, that seems like a huge win right there. Uh, and I think this idea, and again, you sort of all touched on this idea of scaling and socialization, I think is not something I thought I was going to talk about, but I am interested in your insights into this because I feel like that's a challenge in any organization. You've got people doing things, and you want to be able to bubble up those better practices that are developing. You want to be able to share what's being put in to those developments so that we're not all reinventing the wheel. But we also, of course, do want to encourage that experimentation, that exploration, that play. Um, Nicole, you mentioned a community of practice, and I feel like that's one of those mechanisms that allows an institution to explore. I guess I'm just wondering, maybe, Nicole, if you might want to talk a little bit more about that, and then maybe just as a more general question, Jennifer and David can jump in. Like, are you seeing or do you have any suggestions for structures that allow simultaneously exploration, but also that scale that we're all looking for in these kinds of developments?
Yeah, well, I think scale is interesting, right? Like it's one of the things I'm talking with my instructional design students now is sometimes scale can mean different things, right? It can be department, it can be a college, it can be a whole campus. So I think it's thinking about scale in those terms. But I think to your original question, it's the strategy almost has to be, I think, Nate, multimodal, right? Because we know just like our learners are diverse, our faculty and instructors and staff are diverse too, right? They need things at different times in different ways. And you want to make sure that you're putting not obstacles or barriers in place, but enabling and empowering things in place. So things like some people do. They love sharing things. So community of practice, they love coming in person together. They love coming on Zoom together, whatever the case may be, to share some of these things. Or, and some people love, like at Whitewater, we have a once a year celebrating teaching and learning conference where people come and share ideas and things like that. But a lot of people don't love coming to face or coming to synchronous things, right? So that happens too. So I think it's, thinking about, how do we get these ideas and how do we communicate that transparently, effectively, strategically in something like a virtual teaching commons where ideas are there for people when they have time, maybe they're like not digging whatever they're watching on TV at 8 o'clock at night. And they're like, hey, I want to figure this, like, I maybe want to use a GPT in my class. How do I do that, right? Maybe it just comes to their mind at 8 o'clock at night where there's not a center for teaching and learning staff member available, or different kinds of things. So I think it's about how do we get that information so people can get it at all times of the day, right? And even sometimes it's just as easy as how do we archive and transmit information from some of those synchronous things that we do? Like, how do we share out information more broadly with a community of practice of 8 people when really great things were said to a broader campus community? So I think that's a key question of how do you do that? And I think a lot of that has to do with campus culture too.
Yeah, we're also using the community of practice idea alongside more structured workshops. And so right now we're piloting Microsoft Copilot, which is fun to try to market for with that language. But we're collecting weekly updates through, again, Teams Update, which is a form they fill out every week, like what's working, what successes do you have this week, to try to sort of aggregate some of that information, but also sort of capture that. Um, while some pieces of the university might be looking for direct cost savings, like we're trying to emphasize, like, if AI is making your job more enjoyable or the work product better or the learning better or whatever it is, like, that's something to capture as well. But it is difficult to sort of, when you think about differentiated instruction, we have a wide variety of faculty technological fluencies, let's say. And so speaking to the folks who've got a local model installed on their Mac versus in the same room as people who, like, how do I get to 365 again, has been a bit of a challenge. So we're trying to offer programming that's um, more clearly articulated, like, this is an intro to button pushing and like basic prompting, and this is a more philosophical, like, how and why might you use AI. So like the series we're doing is it's based on the university motto, gladly we learn and teach with AI. And so it's 4 weeks before and after spring break of kind of intense programming, and then also some technology upskill sessions that are like, how do you use it, like the difference between deep use and sort of just basic fluency, because I'm finding that until you have someone actually experiment with it and try it and just get into it, it's difficult for any of the programming to actually sink in or work if they're not actively experimenting. Because AI is all, it's in some ways its own tutorial the more that you sort of iterate and ideate with it. I don't know if you've anything else on that side, Jen.
Yeah, both of you made excellent points, and what Nicole, you mentioned transparency, and David, you with the sort of the technological fluency, and I remember, so you and I, David, went with a colleague to one of the very first AI in higher ed conferences. It was in Florida, I think maybe spring summer of 23, and we both sat in many sessions together with just feelings of almost abject horror at some of the things that were being said and some of the conversations being had. And we probably rightfully or rightly categorize some people as just wanting to rip routers out of the wall. Like they just want nothing to do with the technology. And it just it was really an aha moment for me coming home from that conference. And then David and I started doing a lot of collaboration around, okay, what are the supports that would be helpful to all faculty? And so we were thinking, what are the things we can do at the institutional level in our teaching and learning center that would have impact in the micro level individual classroom? And I think, though David and I are both regular users of different Gen AI platforms for a variety of different reasons, and trade tips, and I did this, back and forth. What we've tried to remain, professionally speaking, is agnostic on whether people choose to use Gen AI in the classroom or not, but making sure that decisions that are made about the use of Gen AI are clearly and transparently communicated to students. For me, I adapted the TILT framework, which is the transparency in learning and teaching, and I add to what is usually purpose, task, and evaluation kind of criteria, a general statement about AI use expectations. Why can you use it? For what purposes? What platforms might be great? What are some starters for prompting? Why can't you use it? How will this adversely impact you as a learner if you do sabotage and use the Gen AI to do something? And in any one class, I allow Gen AI sometimes, but not all the time. And I think that was really transformational for me in working with David and thinking about the initial programming that came out of the Teaching and Learning Center was just with that in mind. Whatever you choose, if you don't want to use it for whatever reason, that's fine, but you have to talk about why, and you have to be very clear in expectations. And I think that message was largely well welcomed. But the hard part has been the policing piece, and that's the part I have struggled with in working with faculty. And that may be a whole other question you're going to ask, Nate. But just when there's no checker that can say yes, somebody used AI or no, they didn't, it's navigating those sort of trust issues with your students to get to the outcome, learning outcomes that you hope in using the path that you would like them to, as an instructor. And so that is, I don't know. I feel like I've been talking. David, did I forget anything from sort of where that emerged from?
No, I think you captured it all. As it feels like we've been doing this for 20 years, even though it's only been like four. So
Yeah.
It sounds, I mean, one of the things that you're all surfacing is the idea, Nicole, like you said, multimodal. We need to keep hitting this in a variety of different ways, in a variety of different places, because not everybody, faculty and staff, is going to engage with this in the same way. Some of them are still in intro to button pushing, others are more technically fluent. But also, not everybody's going to read every email that comes across their desk. Not everybody's going to come to every meeting of every community of practice. Uh, if you're at UAGC, you probably just recently got our new AI newsletter issue. I would encourage you to read all of it, but I'm aware that many people will just delete it out of hand, or they'll read a few things and move on. And so this question of socialization or scale is, I think, really, really crucial. And I like what you guys are sort of bubbling up again, which is just this idea that you kind of just have to keep hammering it. And I wonder, we'll come back, Jen, to the idea of policing. I don't like that term, and I don't really like spending too much time thinking about that, because I feel like that's such a preoccupation for so many faculty and staff, not without good reason, but I feel like thinking about that, it becomes almost a barrier to kind of what I want to come back to. Jen, you said very early on this idea of using AI in ways that are productive, but you specifically said creative. And I don't want to turn this into a conversation about, painting or fiction writing, but I do wonder about that creative mindset when we're using these tools, uh, that kind of bridge between the technical fluency that brings us to the tool, but the creativity that allows us to use it in surprising, interesting, different ways. I guess I just wonder if you all personally have stories, or if you've have witnessed something that worked really well, an assignment or just an interaction yourself or a colleague, where you can really kind of talk about that usage in ways that is maybe a little bit more creative and exploratory, and not just sort of like task oriented. David, you feel you want to jump in on that?
yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of like I think there's some assumptions people make about what Gen AI can and can do, about like it's purely a text generation thing. It's purely I give it a task and it will do it right there in the window. But when we think about like or it's like it's purely for like a student would use it to only like I want to generate a whole essay, and I think we know that's probably not a great use of AI for learning. But what about I have this essay, I need holistic feedback on it. Like that seems like a good use of AI, like the student's using it as a study aid. And also thinking though about in our own work, using AI to grade student work, probably bad, without institutional buy-in or human in the loop. But um, all of these file names are wonky. So I could use Claude's model context protocol to look at that folder and rename the files based on the metadata to the student, like to put them all in the same format. So like creative uses, I think, like not thinking about just what does the manufacturer say this tool can do? Because I think generative AI is one of the first technologies where its capabilities are emergent and the creators don't always know it. Like it's really frustrating that Microsoft can't provide just a feature list for Copilot, but it's not just that their documentation is questionable, it's that it can do, like I had it make 50 QR codes, put it in a zip file, all with with the right class and instructor name in the file name, because we were working on a way of using Qualtrics for course evals and things. So like thinking about it, like I have this problem, and then asking the system, can you solve this problem? And sometimes it will think it can and can't, but often it will like, oh, I wouldn't even have thought to use you for this purpose until I try it. So like just like being open to that experimentation, I think can be, especially for when we think about tech users who are more boundary guarders than boundary crossers, sort of a socialization that it's okay to experiment and play. You're likely not going to break something. Um,
I like that reframe a lot. Sorry, and Nicole, Jen, I want to hear from you guys too, but I like the reframe. I mean, the word creativity has, of course, some heft to it. And maybe more what I was trying to think of is using AI in ways that aren't obvious or that surprise us or that give us deliverables we couldn't have come up with on our own. I mean, I'm still on board for creativity, but I feel like what you were just saying, David, I think really kind of sprung that loose for me a little bit. The fact that it's more about, rather than using AI as kind of an A/B accelerator, I'm thinking about ways in which that it helps us branch off, really kind of leverages that type of divergent thinking. But Nicole, Jen, I didn't want to step in there too much, but Jen, I'd
Yeah.
love to hear what you're thinking.
So, and that's by creative earlier, that's really what I meant is outside the box thinking. I find that when I work with students and we're talking about AI, a lot of times they're using it very similarly that in ways that they would use Google. They're searching for information and we have interesting conversations about what is a Google prompt versus what is a good use of AI. And just as sort of an example that went way better than I thought it was going to go. I had a bunch of all of my students in one of my classes this semester had to set a professional goal. It's a professional issues and speech pathology class, and they had to think about what would help them be a better professional. And I've taught this class several times, and this was the first time that probably half of the class came back with time management as their goal, that they're struggling to prioritize and set up their day so that they aren't scrolling on their phones or doing the things that students might do to avoid or not, not adults too, let's be honest. But so I had the students who had time management as their goal stay for the last 15 minutes of class the other day, and I challenged them to start using AI to prompt them to create daily schedules. What are the things you have to get done? What time are your classes? When do you want to wake up? What do you want for downtime? And they were amazed, and so was I, at how AI was able to generate a reasonable schedule for them that did build in time to do the things they wanted to accomplish, but also allowed them to move their tasks forward. And I don't know why, I would never have thought to do that, but it ended up being a really great outside of the box, for me at least, way of using AI with the students to help make their lives easier or better, or, to help them address something that they had identified wanting to work towards. And so I don't always advocate in using actually, I never advocate using Gen AI to do artistic work because the human in that process is so important. And, can it help in, I guess that's a whole philosophical conversation, but creative in ways that's like, how can we use the technology there that can help us be more efficient, effective, and help the people around us do the same thing? So that's the creative piece of AI that I was referring to.
Yeah, and just to jump in, I think I'm fine, Nate, with using creativity there. I think it's important to think about AI with kind of that exploratory kind of curiosity, kind of those mindsets are really important because I think it helps with criticality, thinking about what something does well, what something doesn't do well, which you can get in a lot of places, whether you're using it personally or professionally, or a lot of times I've used AI personally and it's informed my practice professionally, right? But I think one of the big things that's on my mind now is how can I help my students, right? Use these tools responsibly and effectively. I teach, instructional designers who are going to go out into the world and be in centers for teaching and learning like you all have, and different kinds of places. And one of the things I like to do is I'm not a big one on policing, right? I'm one of like, let's learn how to leverage this and really be able to generate like, what is that critical thought about what it does well and what it doesn't do well. And to know that outputs are not always going to be perfect. They're rarely going to ever be perfect. And anything that's even close to what you want takes a lot of upfront work. So I integrate a lot of some of this AI work into assignments so students can start asking those questions. So like up front, you kind of talked about the communication transparency. People get a lot of emails saying that. And, one of the things I work with my students on is you can create the greatest workshop ever, but if nobody knows about it or reads your email, they're not going to come to it, right? So we don't have any classes in my program about marketing per se. But one of the things we do is we go over some like persuasive kind of texts and different kinds of things. But I have them generate a message on a workshop they're working on for the audience, right? And then I have them generate it in kind of a workbook. And then the next step is to ask their AI tool of choice to do the same thing, right? By giving it information, learning to prompt, and then comparing them. Like, what did yours do? What was the strength of yours? What was the strength of AI? What was weaknesses in both? And then use both to create their final draft, right? Because that's how we kind of want students to be using it, right? Like, not as to do everything for them, but to learn how to work with it as a partner, to understand the strengths and the weaknesses, and kind of start developing that criticality that this tool isn't going to do everything for you, and it shouldn't really. There's always that partnership, that dialogue, that human in the loop that's important that Jennifer talked about as well.
Yeah, let's push this forward a little bit, because I feel like the three of you are kind of reflecting that you are in some ways sort of guarded about what AI can and can't do for a professional, for a student, and yet you're all well published, well versed, present often in the area of AI. So you're also clearly I don't want to give a label to it. Enthusiasts, you're aware of and immersed in the field, but also still guarded about those uses. And I think what's kind of emerging here is this sense that there are ways to use AI that may productively support us in critical areas of our work. And I'm trying to be broad there because I want to include students and how they learn as well. But then there's also things that are still crucial to our careers, our identities, our work, that maybe aren't that are okay to work with AI on. I guess I'm kind of making a mess of this question. I'm trying to find a line here where it's this is what AI can support. This is what AI shouldn't support. Is that individual? Is that up to the professor? Is that up to the advisor who's sitting on the phone call with the student and trying to figure out how they're going to do their work? So faculty, staff, students, like, how do we come up with this line? AI can do all these things, but should it? And where do we find that? Where do we center that line?
I
I don't know if I have an
yeah,
answer. So if you guys have answers, that's great.
yeah.
David?
Well, I would think I think it's very disciplinary, and even like within disciplines, it's very course based in terms of like AI might be appropriate for a School of Information Technology course in a way that's different than a creative writing course. Like my background's in writing instruction, and I think about like, ooh, if I were teaching developmental writing, which I haven't in a very long time, like I don't know how I would teach that class, and like where I would start with AI instruction. Um, but I also think about like so one of my colleagues, Roy Magnuson, when we've been working on presentations about AI, he says, our job in the academy is not to make PowerPoints. Our job is to give presentations. And so that sort of clicked for me is like when I feed Copilot or Claude my outline for my presentation, learning objectives and things, and then it creates content, and then I audit, I go back with it and I have a conversation. It's like, no, slide 3 needs to be more like this. Um, and then it takes a few minutes to develop a really good PowerPoint that I can then spend the time like fine tuning the little formatting things, because I like making PowerPoints. But is it a good use of the university's time for me to spend 3 hours making a PowerPoint versus half an hour reviewing PowerPoint based on my other materials. And so I, and I think that is different though. Like if you're a student learning to make PowerPoints for a presentation class, then maybe you don't want to do that. So thinking about where it fits in to me is a very disciplinary class. I think like our stance at Illinois State has been that it's up to the individual instructor as well. I think that sort of as a sort of pedagogical practice, like that needs to be a conscious affirmative choice. I think that we're likely headed towards in the near term where some classes will need to have AI in them. And I think we're still at the precipice of how those conversations are going to go. I don't know how others have thoughts.
I have lots of thoughts. Not all of them are coherent. I think it's impossible for anybody to say these are the absolute uses of Gen AI and these are the absolute non-uses of Gen AI. Um, my It depends. It's a total lawyer's answer, right? It depends. It depends on the context, the use, the need, the risk, the all of the stuff that goes along with any kind of critical decision making and thinking around a problem or a task. And it was really interesting to me. I was just recently at a grant writing mentorship experience. I was a mentor for speech pathologists, physical therapists, occupational therapists seeking grant funding for educational based research or SOTL. And one of the speech pathology faculty who was there was sitting right next to me, and she really wanted to talk about her project, which, when it came down to it, was about sort of like the professional ethics of using AI too much in planning a course. And I said, okay, I want to hear more about this. What are you thinking? And she said, I think it is just horrible that people make case studies using AI. I was thinking about this, case-based learning, effective evidence-informed pedagogy in the health sciences in particular. I use them all the time. And what I didn't say to her is I just had drafted with AI's help 25 different case studies with the same structure and parameters in a nanosecond. And now I can go through them. And as I think Susan said in the comments here, smooth out the rough edges, make it what I want it to be. But it's not a blank page I'm staring at thinking that I have to generate all this stuff. And it was so interesting to me that I'm sitting there with someone who was saying, ethically, that's horrible practice. And I was thinking, I saved 5 hours. And that, to David's point, that time is valuable. And if I can do more student research and student connections with those 5 hours, is it awful that I used it for case studies? But again, it's that individual perspective and perspectacle that really, I think, informs decisions around Gen AI. And I think it just goes back to my earlier first comment about tension. There's tension just interpersonally about how we're using this. And some people are willing to die on this rock, but I'm equally willing not to. And so, it's just, I find it fascinating, the conversations people have around AI. And I don't know, Nicole, you were nodding. I don't know if there's anything you'd add.
I'm totally on Team Jennifer there for the case study. I use them to generate case studies. I mean, before AI, when I was doing more case study work with my students, because I love problem-based learning, right? It's they dig into something, it makes sense. I was hiring, not hire. I was fighting for budgets to, hire subject matter experts to write really good cases. And now I don't have to do that anymore. Budgets are tighter than ever. So it's harder to do that. But now it's really easy to create a really good case, which is better for student learning than, an exam or Scantron or whatever the case may be. So I think there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of kind of messiness. But to say something a little bit more controversial, I do actually have a line with my students. I think, and I talk to them at the beginning of the semester, every semester, about my expectations for AI use, which I think is important to be transparent. And I talk about it through the lens of research. I know that I teach graduate students, but I think it could work too in a different way with undergraduate students. But I talk to them about the research of Michael Gerlach, who talks about cognitive offloading and how just detrimental that is to people who are novice to a topic, right? Like if you have no idea if AI is summarizing an article for you correctly if it's getting something wrong, because you don't really know the topic area. Like, all of us in our, home big research areas, we'd be able to pick that out like nothing, right? We'd be like, oh yeah, that's not even close to right. They didn't cite the right part. Like, you'd be able to pick that out. But folks that are new to a topic, it's really detrimental to their learning to use AI to summarize readings and different kinds of things like that. So we'd spend a lot of time up front in the course talking about that. Also talking about my expectations for them to be, if they use AI, because some of them don't want to use AI, and that's okay too. How to use it really with that criticality. And I'm part of a research group called Open Culture that we've been working for the last few years on, like, the 8 dimensions of AI literacies. And so I talk to my students about those literacies as well, about how we can use them to really be critical users of AI tools, use them well, and really ask if those outputs are what we are really looking for there.
If I could just jump in real quick on that point about students not wanting to use it. So I wrote a module on AI fluency for our honors program. It was one of the key takeaways was, if you're using a free AI source, or service, I mean, you are the product. So don't put your data into free models. It's not a good habit. But the students were very uninterested in fluency. All they wanted to talk about was ethics and environmental uses. They were very anti-AI. I think, like, and there's a reasonable discussion there to be had about, like, water use and power use. I think it has to be contextualized with other types of water and power that we use in other technologies. But just like, I think it just wanted to underscore that point, that student resistance to AI is much higher than I thought it was going to be, compared to sort of faculty resistance. So
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is circling around this the way we kind of kicked off this one part of the question, just this idea of, we all sort of can individually come up with what our compass is. I like doing a PowerPoint, so I'm not going to outsource that because that's part of something that I enjoy. But then there's also, you know, can it generate case studies that would have taken me a lot of time, and what can I do with the time that I've saved? So we're all, I think, professionally, whatever our discipline or context is, we have to think, okay, what does this mean for my identity as a professional? What am I willing to partner with? What do I want to hold close to? How do I define myself? And I think that gets complicated when we deal with students. David, the way you're talking about it, the fact that, we kind of assume, all students are using it all the time to outsource everything. But the reality is that that's not the case. A lot of students are really reluctant to engage with these tools. Uh, and I think we do have a responsibility in the classroom or in higher ed more broadly to draw that line and to say, hey, this is a freshman comp class. So we're going to allow AI in certain areas, but not for certain other things here. And that scale is going to slide when a student goes to a 200 level class or a 300 level class. Things are going to be dictated a little differently. I think this just kind of goes back to this idea of policing, which I said I didn't really want to talk about, but let's talk about it. Uh, what does that mean in the classroom then? If you're telling students, hey, you can use it for this, but you can't use it for that. I know, people have put in the chat, and I know this is something that we're all seeing and dealing with constantly. I'm just, I'm not looking for a site or a trick. I don't trust detectors. I don't think we should be using AI detectors. I think AI detectors are AI. And if we don't trust AI, then why are we going to trust a detector? All the same ethical and environmental concerns that apply to AI usage go double for the detector. So I don't love those, but I guess I'm looking for a mindset shift. I'm looking for a redirection. I'm looking for a teaching aspect. I'm wondering if you all have thoughts on that aspect. You're in the classroom, you're trying to guide productive usage. How do you have that conversation? And how do you have that conversation when it goes off the rails, when it fails?
this is probably the question I get most often from faculties about detectors, or I come to an unhappy voicemail on my office phone, because one of the resources we made is I think it's about 2,000 words about why AI detectors don't currently work and how they try to work, and I think, um, it was David Rettinger who came to speak at ISU a few years ago for our teaching and learning symposium. He talked about, surveillance is like a 1 foot high fence. It's really going to only disadvantage the students who were least able to get over that fence in the first place. When we think like there are some HTML markers in the paragraph tags. If you copy and paste from ChatGPT into Canvas, you can find them in discussion posts. But like if you're looking at the HTML code of your discussion post responses, like you got a lot of time on your hands to be able to do that. And so I think part of it is cultivating integrity as a positive value rather than as a something to police. Like I know like that, I mean, that's easier said than done, but like thinking about being really clear about the why we're not using AI, and sort of cultivating trust rather than I'm here to police you, I'm here to help you grow. Because I think at a certain point, if AI can get a B- on your assignment, and um, I don't know, what like does the assignment need to change? Maybe, but also I think I would really struggle if presented with some AI writing and some B- freshman comp writing, which is which, because AI and novice writing look a lot alike, and they're sort of, um, overuse of thesaurus or saying a lot but saying nothing type of things. And so I think it's extremely difficult to spot. And so I guess in my sort of fatigue, I'm just my stance has been to like just assume good intentions, assume that it was authentically created, but then like the same ways we look for plagiarism in other contexts, like is there a sudden change in tone or voice? Is there a sudden change in font color, or a left in of the sort of dialogic tags that ChatGPT or Copilot leave and things like that? So um, yeah, I don't think that necessarily is a solution, but trust is I think where we need to try to cultivate.
I
And David,
totally,
sometimes, oh, go ahead.
totally. Oh gosh. One thing that just builds right on that, and then Nicole, take it away. So I actually have my students sign an attestation statement for their work that they submit to me. We have a code of ethics professionally, and I tie their ability to be trustworthy as students to their commitment to fulfilling the parameters of the assignments that I put forward in class. And they either have to attest that they didn't use generative AI and electronically sign their name, or they have to disclose how they used it, what prompts they used, how they felt that the Gen AI use supported or hindered their learning. And those things have been really helpful for me to understand how students are using them. And I've had students say that if they couldn't, I've had students tell me that they can't lie to me because it feels like they're lying to their mom. And I'm okay with that. So, I mean, having those conversations around that level of trust is really, I think, key. And that's probably the only thing we can control. Sorry, Nicole, I feel like I stepped on you at the beginning of that response.
No, you didn't. I was gonna make a joke about M dashes, about like how they're like, there's all these red flags out there, right? But a lot of us, myself, guilty of a lot of things that might sound like AI. But I think I wanted to connect it to something, Jen, that you said kind of before, this idea of, and maybe we talked about it, so we're kind of going in a circle a bit, but I brought it up earlier that faculty, like, there's time, right? There's a time crunch of learning new technologies and different kinds of things. Our students are having similar time crunches, right? More than ever, students are juggling, more working hours, caretaking, different kinds of things like that. And so I think one of the things that we really need to do is like understand where our students are coming from, right? And that time is a valuable resource to them. And I don't love busy work, and I don't think that they do either from what I read about their perceptions of things. So I think it's really important. I think Jen brought it up earlier, the TILT framework, the transparent assignment framework, about really being clear about what assignments do for students and why you're having them do it, how it connects, because everything connects in our brain, right? When we're designing the course, when we're facilitating a course, it all connects. We're all doing things for a reason to support student learning, but it's not always obvious to somebody who doesn't know the topic and what is happening there. So I think really being transparent and being like connective with students is really important there as well. I think really thinking about assignments in a way that I don't think that it's hard to make an assignment, right? That's quote unquote AI proof. Does that exist? I mean, you can do a lot of different things. There's a lot of strategies out there that we can leverage, right? Like bringing their personal experience into it and different kinds of things like that. And maybe trying to have them do different modalities, like have them do a video of themselves talking about a concept or doing a digital diary, which is one of my favorite things that I like to do with students now, just to hear them thinking about topics, right? But all of those take a lot of time to grade, right? All those authentic assessments. And I think that's the big struggle that I'm seeing now is I'm actually seeing the flip side now of a lot of instructors saying like, I'm doing more authentic assessments. So my grading and feedback time is so big now. How do I use AI, right? Like to help me with that feedback, not do it for me, but maybe help me with that piece. And I think that's kind of a tension now that I'm starting to see as well rise to the top a bit. And what does that really kind of look like? And instructors not always being totally transparent with their students about how they're using AI is another interesting topic too. Like a lot of things, right?
Well,
I
there's a lot of questions in the chat about time, and you've brought it up, and David brought it up. And I think, if we're talking about institutional response to Gen AI, it's reasonable to say that faculty do need to push back about things like class size and enrollment and being able to manage the workload that comes along with smart design in this, moment. And, I was very lucky. I teach a professional writing class and it used to be capped at 40 students, but it's got a lot of writing in it. And I put my foot down and said 23. 23 is the max. And I gave them, a rationale for it and how there's other places on campus that do that. And now I have a cap on my class. There's a financial commitment to that by the institution. But at the same time, if we're there to teach well and to support our students' learning, and we're expected to be making these changes in response to technologies we can't control, that is a conversation to be had. Where is the institutional support for the good teaching that needs to happen right now, with and around these technologies?
I feel like we're circling this idea of obviously transparency, David talking about trust and maybe a little bit of grace in dealing with students. But I think that comes back to making sure that we're having these conversations. And that means ourselves in the workforce, our colleagues, managing up, Jennifer, the way you're describing, making sure that the institution knows, hey, this is a burden and we need to think about what this looks like. And then having that conversation with students as well, so that they understand that these aren't just capricious policies that we're throwing into place, but that there's a reason for it. And hopefully that springs a little bit of conversation and openness there too. I think this is a great conversation. I think there's probably one thing that all of you said that we could have done another 2 or 3 hours on. A lot to talk about here. Just really appreciate you taking the time to walk through some of this with us. Ultimately, conversation, which I think went really well, but there's not a lot of answers, and I feel like we only have a little bit of time left. I kind of just want to spring a quick pulse check on you guys. So I'm just wondering, in your own work, how much are you using AI? People love to have these kind of scales, and they're saying like, "Oh, I use it every day. I use it all the time." I guess I'm more worried, or not worried. I'm more interested in like how meaningful do you think that has been to your work? How much has your work as a higher ed professional changed uh, with the use of AI? How do you value that? We don't have time for super in-depth answers, but I guess I'm just kind of wondering, Jennifer, would you say a lot, little, somewhere in the middle?
Probably somewhere in the middle. I mean, if we take away the times where I'm putting football jerseys on my dog's pictures, right? Like that is a fun, non-professional use of AI. I don't do it often, but anyway. But in terms of just like, gosh, efficiencies, I just feel like I have been able to harness AI to help me create templates, starting places. I try not to overuse it for some of the reasons that were put into the chat about limited resources and different things like that. But I really feel like I don't use it for ideation very often. I use it for efficiency. So I still like the intellectual work of ideating myself and talking to people. So I haven't replicated that necessarily in the AI space, but just how can I take the labor off my plate that is holding me back from doing that intellectual work?
So easy to rely on it as a crutch. So to make those intentional decisions, I think is key, Jen. Nicole?
Yeah, I think I like what Jen said there around, taking the labor off the plate. Like, for instance, I was in a meeting the other day and people were like, hey, is there any good areas for us to start an EDD at, Whitewater, right? Like, and I was like, I went to ChatGPT. I was like, can you do a quick landscape analysis for me of EDD programs in instructional design or learning technology? And I'm not saying that this is correct. Like, I'm all the things that it output, I fact checked, right? But I'm like, yeah, this could be something. But it's like a starter sometimes, right? So it can be a starter to be like, ooh, this is now something that this is a route I'm really going to go down and investigate, and I'm going to do more of that on my own. That was with ChatGPT. But I think we talked about a lot of things in the different realms. I use it in my scale probably a lot for different things, just for ideas like that. It's up all the time. I'm kind of asking it like, hey, like, is this even a thing? Like, should it be a thing? And then I go do said thing, right? I don't ask it to do the things actually always for me, but like, then I guess that's a lie. 'Cause sometimes I do, right? Teaching, like, it does a case for me. But I put all the work into what I want in that case, right? Like, I think people who don't have a lot of experience with AI can sometimes say like, oh, like you just have it do all your work for you, right? But to get something, to get a good case out, and I think Jen could back me up here, like it takes a lot of work to get the case that you want and for it to operate the way that you want. So it's a lot of those kinds of things. um I think it's good for some other things too. Like I was writing a research article and I put it down for multiple months because I was working on another project. And my literature review I felt was stale. So I shared my literature review. I said, what other new things have come out in the last few months that I might not know about? And it gave me like a list of things I should look at. So I think it can be helpful, but you gotta find that right way to like that you're still the human in the loop. You're still the one that's doing the work and you're the one that is ultimately accountable, I guess, for that work too.
David, what do you think? Where do you fall on the scale here?
So I like Jen, I think I use it for efficiency most, but it, I found that it hasn't made tasks go more quickly. It's let me do the tasks better. For one of our services is midterm chat. So we'll visit a classroom, we'll talk with the students, we'll create a report on what's working, what's not working. Just typing up the letter used to take a lot of time, but now I can do that quickly and make a much more robust letter with suggested instructional activities they could be doing. And so it probably takes the same amount of time, but the product I've produced is better. I don't use slides much in my teaching, but now, as an instructional support person, like it's been sort of a learning curve to like get used to like thinking of more like lectures. And so now my slides have speaker notes. I never used to do them because I walk around the room. And so now I can give my slides to somebody who can't attend better than just a blank, like no notes PowerPoint. So just like efficiency, but in the terms of making my work, I think better, not necessarily be able to do more work.
My current use case is that I'm rewatching The X-Files, and so Claude is my companion for my rewatch, helping me determine which episodes to watch and what's actually happening from episode to episode. It's weird. I feel like, there are ways to use it professionally in the context of our work that can lighten the load a little bit, that can maybe extend our impact, if not extend what we're actually doing. But I feel like I keep coming back to some of these more idiosyncratic uses where I feel like I really am embracing again that the possibility there in how this changes the way we're experiencing some of the things that we normally experience in life. This has been great, folks. I really appreciate everything you brought to the table today. I appreciate you just spending some time with us. Great insights, great conversation all around. And really appreciate all of you joining us here today to have these conversations. I think that this is one of those ways we scale and socialize some of what's going on. So again, we'll send the recording out in a little bit. I'll include a little bit of extra information about Nicole, Jen, David, some of the great work that they're doing. But again, I just really appreciate you all taking time here today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank
Of
you.
course.